Picture yourself on this ship. Your instinct screams one thing: fight. Haul the ropes taut, set the sails against the wind, and grip the helm with a death grip. But the captain gives an order that sounds like suicide: slacken everything. Let the ship dance. This wasn't madness. It was a secret survival protocol that allowed a wooden shell to endure what sank naval frigates. This maneuver, known as running under bare poles, was a direct contradiction to admiralty regulations. Naval ships like the Spanish fleet off the coast of Florida in 1715 tried to hold formation against a hurricane, and they were annihilated. Pirates, however, operated outside the rules, and this is what saved them. The standard tactic for fighting a storm was a death trap. A ship rigidly resisting the ocean would be splintered in minutes, masts snapped in half, ropes tore with a crack, a wave would break the hull's back. 9 out of 10 ships caught in such a storm vanished forever. But not those who knew the secret. The physics of the disaster is simple. A single rogue wave could unleash up to 100 tons of water per square meter onto the hull. This is comparable to the weight of 15 adult elephants pressing down on a single point. No timber could withstand such an impact. A rigid structure turned the ship into a target for this force. This video will answer 3 questions. How did simple physics turn surrender into victory? What cognitive switch did captains use to compel dozens of terrified men to go against their instincts and obey an order their brains registered as certain death? And how can this pirate principle be used today to navigate any storm in your life? The key to it all: resonance. When a ship fights a wave, it enters into resonance with it, like a soldier marching in step across a bridge and causing it to collapse. Each wave's impact becomes stronger than the last until the hull gives way. The pirates understood. To survive, they had to break this deadly rhythm, and they did it with brilliant simplicity. This isn't just a theory. In 1831, the Broughton Suspension Bridge in England collapsed precisely because a troop of soldiers marched in step across it, inducing catastrophic resonance. A ship in a storm is that same bridge, and the waves are the marching soldiers. The pirates were the first to learn how to command their ship to fall out of step with the elements. A rigid structure in the midst of chaos always loses. The pirates intuitively transformed their ship from a brick tower into bamboo. They didn't try to prove to the ocean that they were stronger. They accepted that the ocean was a force not to be conquered, but to be harnessed. Look at the Taipei 101 skyscraper. Inside, a giant 660-ton pendulum hangs. Its sole purpose is not to fight the typhoon, but to dance with it, damping its oscillations. A pirate ship, by slackening its rigging, became an organic version of this pendulum. It became a system that absorbed chaos. A wave is pure kinetic energy. Fighting it is a head-on collision. Dancing with it is redirecting that energy. The ship ceased to be a punching bag and became a surfer. It caught the wave to move with it, not be crushed by it. The founder of Aikido, Morihei Ueshiba, taught that true victory is victory over oneself. The pirate captain forced the ship to do the same, to stop fighting the external force and conquer its internal desire to resist. The ship didn't deflect the blow. It merged with it, becoming an extension of the wave. Right now, mentally clench your fist as hard as you can. Feel that tension? Now, relax it. The pirate ship experienced the same thing. Under the storm's pressure, the clenched fist would break, but the relaxed palm allowed the force to pass through it. In some area of your life right now, you are clenching your fist instead of relaxing your palm. Your clenched fist is the activation of the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight mode. The relaxed palm is the parasympathetic system, the rest and digest mode. The pirates intuitively understood that in total chaos, when there's nowhere to run and nothing to fight, the only way to survive is to forcibly switch the entire ship into a parasympathetic state. But this dance was not just passive drifting. It was a set of 3 specific, perfectly honed maneuvers that turned the ship into a living creature. And the first of these involved the ship's heart, its masts. In port taverns, this set of techniques was whispered about as the drunken master's waltz. And this was no insult. It was the highest praise for the ability of the ship and crew to move unpredictably, flexibly, and with perfect balance in the heart of the storm. The first maneuver began with the ship's ligaments and tendons, its ropes. To slacken them didn't mean to abandon them. It was a precise calculation. The shrouds and stays supporting the mast were loosened just enough to give it a few degrees of freedom. The mast ceased to be a bone that breaks. It became a spine that bends. This held a hidden genius born from a material shortage. Ropes of that era were made of hemp. When wet, they would shrink, tightening the rigging to the tension of steel cables. If not, loosened, the storm itself would have snapped them or broken the mast. The pirates turned a physical flaw of their equipment into a key element of their survival system. The second element of the dance was the helm. It wasn't used to steer a course. It was used for micro-corrections to keep the ship strictly perpendicular or parallel to the waves. The helmsman wasn't steering the ship. He was catching its balance on the crest of chaos. The greatest nightmare for any captain was the word broaching. This is the moment a wave turns the ship broadside and instantly capsizes it. The helmsman's job was not to sail somewhere, but to prevent broaching second by second. He wasn't a driver, but a neurosurgeon, making microscopic movements that determined the life of the entire organism. And finally, the third act, the ship's internal organs. Cannons, crates, and barrels became part of the system. The crew in the ship transformed into a single organism, breathing in time with the storm. On command, the crew would roll tons of cargo to the windward side, actively helping the ship counteract its list. A single ship's cannon weighed over a ton. Imagine having to roll a car across a slippery floor in a rocking room. Risking being crushed, the crew turned dead weight into an active stabilization system. They were manually creating what computers and hydraulics accomplish in modern racing yachts. For an ordinary sailor, the order to slacken the rigging sounded like betrayal. His entire life he had learned to tighten, to secure, to fight. Now he was being ordered to let go. Imagine his terror as the mast above his head began to sway menacingly. But after an hour, he would understand. This creaking and swaying was the sound of life, and the dead silence followed by a hard impact was the sound of death. The creaking was feedback, like an EKG of the heart. As long as the ship creaked, it was alive, it was breathing, it was adapting. Silence meant the system had frozen, and the next sound would be the crack of the breaking hull. The sailor learned to love that creak. But all these brilliant techniques were useless without one element, the most fragile and most important one, the human mind. How do you convince 50 men on the verge of panic to trust a paradox and not mutiny? All these maneuvers were the brilliant hardware of survival. But any hardware is useless without an operating system. And that operating system was the crew's psychology. If the panic program had crashed, all that hardware would have gone to the bottom. Under extreme stress, the brain doesn't look for complex solutions. It offers two options, fight or flight. Fighting the ocean is useless. Fleeing the ship is impossible. The captain's order to slacken the rigging was a third option that a sailor's brain simply couldn't see. Freeze and adapt. Panic on board was more dangerous than any wave. It led to the mistakes that sank ships. The amygdala, the brain's ancient fear center, is responsible for this reaction. In a storm, the entire crew's amygdalae were screaming, demanding immediate primitive action. The captain's task was to achieve the impossible, to use his own calm to reprogram the crew's reaction from an instinctive fight to a higher neocortical analyze. The captain's role wasn't to shout orders, but to be the living embodiment of confidence. He stood on the deck, untethered, showing with his own body that the ship's dance was normal. His calm voice, his routine actions, all of it infected the crew with composure. This is the work of mirror neurons. When the crew saw a confident captain, their own neurons began to reflect that state. The captain became an external regulator for the entire crew's nervous system. He wasn't just giving orders, he was literally transmitting self-control through an invisible neural network. Let's appreciate the difficulty of this psychological trick. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is calming a crying child and 10 is convincing passengers on a crashing plane that everything is fine, maritime historians give this anchor of calm a solid 8 or 9. It's comparable to the work of an air traffic controller calmly guiding several planes with failed engines to a safe landing. Any note of panic in his voice, and the pilots will start making mistakes. A captain in a storm was that controller for 50 souls, where the plane was their own mind. This principle is known today as stress inoculation. Elite military units trained by simulating extreme stress to teach soldiers not to fight it, but to operate within it. Don't try to stop the hurricane. Learn to act in its eye. The U.S. Navy SEALs have a motto: slow is smooth and smooth is fast. In the chaos of a storm, panicked, jerky movements lead to failure. Smooth, controlled actions, the dance with the situation, paradoxically become the fastest path to survival. In this sense, pirates were the first Navy SEALs. This principle doesn't just work on the ocean. Look at the Kodak company. It met the digital revolution like a storm and decided to fight. The irony is that the world's first digital camera was invented by its own engineer, Stephen Sasson, back in 1975. But the leadership tightened the rigging. They decided to defend their film business to the last. They built the sturdiest ship but refused to dance, and they sank. Now, consider Netflix. They constantly loosened their grip, moving from DVDs to streaming, then to content production. They didn't fight the wave, they became surfers. The market is the same as the ocean. You can hold formation and brake, or you can catch its wave. The same thing happens inside your head. Your brain is your ship, and your panicked thoughts are the storm. Trying to fight anxiety or procrastination only strengthens them. It's the same deadly resonance. Modern approaches like acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, teach you not to fight a thought, but to allow it to be, to dance with it without letting it break you. Thoughts and feelings are the weather. You can't order a hurricane to stop, but you can learn to be a captain who knows how to navigate any storm without trying to stop it. You are not the storm. You are the sky in which it happens. Think about the main problem that's worrying you right now. Now ask yourself the pirate's question. Where am I pulling the ropes too tight? Ask yourself, what rope in my life is stretched so taut it's about to snap? What sail am I trying to hold against a hurricane-force wind? And what would happen if I dared to give the order to slacken everything and just see where the wave takes me? Sometimes the strongest move is to stop making moves. From wooden ships to modern boardrooms and therapists' offices, this paradoxical principle of survival remains unchanged. And now, we will assemble it into a short, crystal-clear protocol that you can take with you. This principle is like an old but perfectly accurate nautical chart, passed down through the centuries. It's written not in ink, but in salt and wind. And now, we will decipher its symbols. Here they are. 4 commands from a captain to himself. This is your personal compass. First, look the storm in the eye. Don't turn away. Call it by its name. Fear, debt, illness, loss. Acknowledge its power without downplaying or ignoring it. It is real. It is here, and only by looking at it directly can you stop being its victim. Second, drop the ropes. Identify your point of maximum pointless resistance. That habit, that thought, that struggle that burns all your energy for no result. Find that rope pulled taut to the breaking point and consciously let it go. Third, listen to the ocean. Freeze for a moment. Stop generating noise with your panicked actions and start listening. Every chaos has its own rhythm, in the movement of the market, in the dynamics of a conflict, in the course of an illness. Find its pulse, feel it. And fourth, ride the wave. Once you've found the rhythm, you will see the waves. Find the biggest one, the one that scares you the most, and ask one question. How can its crushing energy not sink me, but carry me to a whole new level? Pirates survived not because they were the best fighters. They survived because they were the best dancers. They knew that in a battle with the ocean always wins. But in a dance with it, you can not only survive, but also steal its energy for your own journey. And this brings us to the ultimate question, one with no answer in the history books. What was this, at its core? A brilliant engineering calculation honed over years? An act of pure desperation that happened to work and became a legend? Or was it pure intuition, something between calculation and desperation, a deep, animalistic sense of harmony with chaos? Write one of 3 words in the comments: calculation, desperation, or intuition. Let's see which philosophy wins.